How's it going?
Good, James. How are you?
I'm doing well. Nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you. I apologize for my drab office. We switched offices a while ago, and I don't have anything up on the walls yet. So
It's all
it's the
good.
most boring background in this world of online meetings. I gotta put some stuff up there.
Yeah, well, I mean, if I'm going to be honest with you, I've done plenty of Zoom meetings. This is going to be my first Zoom podcast, so
Oh, okay, all right. I'm sorry I
hopefully
can't be there in person. I'm sorry I won't be there until tomorrow.
that's all
Either.
right. It's good practice for me, anyways. I've had a few other people ask if they could do a podcast via Zoom, and I've said no.
Yeah.
So this is good practice. So hopefully it works out good.
Well, I spent some money a while ago on the headset, so the sound should be better than just shouting into a computer speaker. So hopefully
No,
that'll help.
yeah, it sounds great. It
Oh, good.
sounds so. I guess let's just dive right into it. Why don't you tell everybody who you are and talk a little bit about Phil Talks Whiskey, your YouTube channel and all that good stuff, and then we'll kind of get into
Sure.
your meeting with your meet with Richard and how the whole Ironfish collaboration came about.
Yeah. So I run a bourbon adventure company called Phil Talks Whiskey, and what I do is I create and host unique and custom whiskey experiences of all shapes and sizes, whether it's private tastings or presentations, bourbon trail tours, industry events, you name it. We do it all, y'all. Is our Kentucky motto down here, and it's anything that gives me a chance to talk whiskey. It's an amazing industry with plenty of history and lore and innovation, everything from the distilling side to the business side. I find it fascinating, and I can't get enough of it. So this business allows me to do just that, and that's talk whiskey with everyone across the country and all around.
This episode is brought to you by the Ramsdale Regional Center for the Arts. You can find them online at www.ramsdaletheater.org, or you can reach them by phone at 231-398-9770. So check the website for the ticketing information. That's www.ramsdaletheater.org. Also, real quick, the good people over at the Ramsdale Regional Center for the Arts want me to remind you that they're doing a Patsy Cline tribute called Remembering Patsy Cline on May 24th. So get tickets now at ramsdaletheater.org. Blue Bayou. I think she sung Blue Bayou, right? Patsy Cline, Blue Bayou. Check it out, ramsdaletheater.org. This episode is brought to you by the Outsider of Manistee. We're showcasing their family tavern, their beer garden, and their arcade. Their large outdoor patio. This place is really awesome. It's very focused on family, getting people outside, getting them to tour the city of Manistee, showcasing our social district with their newly added indoor bar, which is awesome. They have 6 drafts, over 100 canned beers and canned cocktails to choose from on the menu. This is a really awesome place for the family. You got to mess the kids, fill their pockets full of quarters, let them have at those pinball machines. Mom, Dad, enjoy a nice cold draft beer or a canned cocktail. Get yourself something to eat, feed the family, feed the kids, wake up that liver a little bit, and then go enjoy downtown Manistee. These guys are located at 457 River Street. You can find them on outsidermanistee.com. Call them at 231-299-1235. or order for pickup and delivery at orderoutsider.com. Check this place out. You won't regret it.
Okay, so I was just thinking that maybe you just had this YouTube channel and you were putting out this content, but because I watched a few of your videos and I found them
Oh, good.
super
Thank you.
interesting.
Hey, wonderful.
Yeah, very knowledgeable. You're very, very knowledgeable. I didn't realize that this was a company of yours.
Yes, the social media presence, whether it's on Instagram or YouTube, what have you, is just a way to kind of share people with different people who may not be familiar with me, what I'm about, and what I know. It's kind of hard to explain what I do sometimes to people. I had a presentation I was doing, and when I was done, I was telling a family member about it, and then they asked if I was like selling the bottles, like it was a Tupperware meeting, like if I was going in and doing a pitch. So, and since I'm not associated with any one brand specifically or exclusively, it's kind of hard to explain. So the YouTube videos and the different content I post is a way for me to talk whiskey and kind of just share what I have out there. I hope to grow that. It's fledgling, it's just kind of getting started on that. But everyone keeps saying, you got to make videos. You got to make some videos. So I said, all right,
Yeah,
I'll make some videos. I
YouTube.
don't between you and me, James, and everyone's listening, I don't really know what the hell I'm doing. I'm just trying my best to share some whiskey knowledge of it. Keep it short, they tell me. Don't ramble on.
Yeah.
Save your rambling on when you're in front of people. Keep it tight, they say.
I think you're doing a great job. YouTube is one of the hardest nuts to crack. It's one of the hardest places to gain subscribers. Views can come and go. I mean, you can go viral on YouTube and see a shitload of views, but grabbing the people to subscribe to your channel is really difficult. I think it's just because they're so easy to access. Like, I could just go in and type your name and all your stuff pops up.
Right.
So subscribing it's just like an extra layer, but
right.
you're doing great.
That's why I gotta say, smash that subscribe button.
Yeah.
Pound that subscribe button. Yeah, it's a long, the person who's helping me out with it, she keeps telling me it's slow in growth. Don't look there's no magic pill to take to become a YouTube sensation. And the truth of it is that it's hard. I would love to have a podcast. I'd love to have a full-time YouTube channel, but the amount of time and effort and even money to put in there and to stand out against some wonderful people who are already doing it on the daily basis, I'd rather focus on that as a way to share my story, but the events and the different tastings I host is the primary thing that occupies my time.
How long have you been in the beverage industry?
About 10 years. I used to work in digital marketing and different things like that. And then I moved to Kentucky and I started doing tours. I was a tour host for a company that took guests up and down the Bourbon Trail to different distilleries and beyond. And I did that for a number of years. And then I got involved with a great organization called the Bourbon Country Burn, which is a 3-day bike ride and whiskey festival that we'll talk about. And I served as their development manager for a couple of years. And then they were entrepreneurs of their own and they kind of inspired me. And I took a look back and I said, what do I enjoy doing most? I love sitting down and talking or tasting whiskey with people. So why not have a business that does exclusively that? So I've been in this role with my own company, going on about 3 years. I started it at the very tail end of 2021. So, yeah. So
where does your passion for bourbon come from and whiskey?
It's funny because I'd always been a bit of a whiskey drinker, but I'd always was relatively lukewarm on it. I'd had it along the way and, started out with so many people drinking bad beer in college and working my way up to cocktails and then whiskey. But I think for a long time, I was associating whiskey with just Scotch, which of course is just one kind of whiskey. And those peaty flavors, those smoky flavors you get in a lot of the Scotch pours didn't really do it for me. It was something I enjoyed occasionally, but not a lot. And then little by little, I discovered bourbon and the wonderfulness that having a corn-based whiskey, giving it those sweet notes, the complexity of aging in the barrel. And the more I learned, the more I dug in, the more fascinated I was. The colorful characters, the larger-than-life stories, the nuanced process of making it, how one little change in the aging or the mash bill can create an entirely different product. The distinct American connection to it that doesn't really, we have only in American whiskey. There's no other really spirit that has that kind of etymology and connection with the rise of America over the last 250 years. I loved it. I couldn't get enough of it. And then that now has since branched out to a larger appreciation of all whiskeys: Irish whiskey, Canadian whiskey, Tennessee whiskey, not blended whiskeys, but any other kind of whiskey out there. So it was kind of just a journey where one stone uncovered the next. And I found myself wanting to know more and more and more. Luckily, there are a lot of great resources out there. And even just going on a distillery tour for an hour and asking good questions, it's amazing what you can learn. So
have you developed any kind of partnerships with these distilleries where they, aside from, and we'll get into Ironfish, but I mean, as far as like, it's exciting to have somebody who's as knowledgeable as you are and who puts the content out that you put out to help showcase some of these distilleries, no matter how big or how small. I think it's a lot more impactful what you do for a smaller distillery to kind of have you come in and do what you do. There's a lot of people out there online. So background on me, I don't know if Richard told you anything about me, but I owned a liquor store, Manistee Beverage Company. I just sold it about 6 months ago. And, I've been in the beer and wine business for the better part of 2 decades. And so craft beer, fine wine is my background. And over the course of the owning the liquor store, I really got into whiskey, bourbon, and kind of like those nuances. But everybody's an expert, right? Yeah. I like to surround myself with people smarter than me. I never pretend to be an expert in any of these things. But
sure, I would never use an expert to describe myself either. I'll settle on aficionado, but that's about it. So
what you do with your content, I would be terrified to look at the comments sometimes. Like, if you're expressing enthusiasm for a particular bourbon or whiskey, I can only imagine what some of the feedback you get.
So it's not the negative feedback, because everyone's entitled to their opinion. It's the bad takes and lousy information, and those are the ones where I just bite my tongue and say, and maybe I give the comment a like and move on. Just the other day, I think I posted something about Pappy Van Winkle. Always a hot topic. Always something people have a lot to say about. And this guy said, you know what the secret is? All the Pappies hiding in Salt Lake City, Utah. They send more Pappy to Salt Lake City than any other market because they know they won't buy it there. And I said, first of all, your argument makes no sense. And second of all, while I don't work for Sazerac, I'm pretty sure Salt Lake City is not the #1 major distribution point of Pappy Van Winkle, but it's all the time. It's these, my buddy told me. I once heard that. And so I have a whole presentation called Shattering Myths and commonly held beliefs in the world of bourbon because, bad information spreads in the world of whiskey. That's what drives me nuts. Not when someone that says, I think this product tastes like swill. That's fine. You can think that. It's when people say, well, I heard that they're emptying one bottle and just putting in another and changing the label. And I have to sit on my hands and say, let me tell you all the reasons that's probably not anywhere near the truth. And as far as doing what I do and filling the niche I do, I sometimes like to joke, although this isn't entirely accurate, that I view myself as almost like bourbon Switzerland. I'm friend to all the brands, but loyal to none. And the truth is, really, I like to kind of fill in the gaps where the brands aren't telling the stories because they have a goal, they have a vision for their brand, ultimately to move the cases. And that's great. So some of the stories they choose not to showcase may fall behind the cracks. Maybe someone who's a previous owner of the distillery who's kind of been forgotten except by his family and a few local markers, but did amazing, remarkable things, but no longer currently associated with the brands. Or maybe some of the more nefarious characters during the Prohibition era that skirted a little too south on the wrong side of the law. And they don't like to talk too much about those guys. So I like to come in and these brand ambassadors, these distillery reps, they're incredibly knowledgeable and they're wonderful, but they have their story to tell about their brand and no one knows it better than them. So not being associated with one brand exclusively allows me to kind of dabble and learn the strengths of all the brands and their histories and how they intertwine. I was just thinking the other day, if you go to visit the Stitzel Weller Distillery, which is owned by Diageo, and it's the home of I.W. Harper and the Orphan Barrel series, and a couple other brands. There's a giant smokestack, and on it says Old Fitzgerald because that's what was made there for a long time. Now Old Fitzgerald is a Heaven Hill product, and the two are competitors, have nothing to do with each other. I'm the one who gets to come in and make that connection between the old tenant and the new tenant, where neither one particularly wants to talk about each other. So that's kind of the fun part of all things bourbon and whiskey is making those connections.
Yeah,
can't tell the smoke tower. It's beautiful, looks lovely. It just celebrates a brand that they have nothing to do with, so they prefer not to spend too much time talking about it.
The stories about some of these bourbons and whiskeys and their origin are amazing. And I, like I said, when I first started getting in the bourbon and whiskey, my wife bought me the book Bourbon Empire.
Great book. I recommend that to just about anyone who wants to know the story of American whiskey.
I felt every time I had a new team member come on board, that's one of the first books I gave. You should read this and just kind of brush yourself up. But the fact that it was a lot of it was just kind of, storytelling and most of it fictional with respect to building a brand. I thought was super interesting.
Yeah. One great story is that, Elijah Craig often gets celebrated as the father of bourbon. And even on the bottle, it still says something like that. And zero evidence, none, the connection that's remotely the case. And the brand knows it, and it's kind of a wink and a nod. Some people say, we want to go see the gravesite of Elijah Craig since he invented bourbon. I was like, you're better off not doing it. And one thing I always say is never conflate a story with the quality of the bourbon. The story may be garbage and the bourbon may be great, or the story may be real and authentic and the bourbon may be garbage. So the two, aside from getting your attention, usually don't have much to do with one another.
Do you have a favorite story, a favorite history of a particular brand?
I do. One that I like to tell a lot, and that and it's just so Kentucky and so kind of mid-century America. And the Maker's Mark people, they don't shy away from this, but I think they've got a limited time on the tours of the presentation, so they don't tell the story often. But the story goes of legendary Colonel Harlan Sanders of KFC fame, Kentucky Fried Chicken fame. And he was from Corbin, Kentucky, and the Samuels family of Maker's Mark fam had already been distilling for a while and been in the business. And Maker's Mark was a relatively new brand that was just starting. And the Samuels families went to a lot of Kentucky games, and whenever they went to see Kentucky play Tennessee and Knoxville, they stayed in Corbin because it was a short drive. And they knew the Colonel Sanders, and he was over, and they were chatting and catching up. And he said, I've got this great idea where I'm going to show people how to make fried chicken. I'm going to franchise it, but I'm going to drive the truck around to each store and show them how to do it and take a commission of like a nickel per chicken. But I just don't have enough staff. I don't have enough help me out. And Bill Samuels Sr., the founder of the brand, pointed to his son, Bill Samuels Jr., who is currently the president emeritus. I think he's 82 years old, something like that, who was about 16 at the time, and said, Bill Jr. here just got his driver's license. He'll help you. And Bill said, what's going on now? And that whole summer, for the first summer that KFC was really around, Bill Samuels Jr. drove Colonel Sanders around while Colonel Sanders was filling out paperwork and creating orders, and Bill Jr. was hauling the fryer on and off the truck, doing the heavy lifting. And it only lasted a summer, but if you look back on the official paperwork of Kentucky Fried Chicken, employee number one was Bill Samuels Jr. And all these years later, you have these two international, incredibly recognizable brands where you could take the wording right off a KFC logo or take the wording off of a Maker's Mark Red Drip bottle, two Kentucky icons, and they had their start about the same time with some of the same people, KFC and Maker's Mark. And I love stories like that. It's amazing the connection they have.
Yeah, I was thinking of a question to ask you about kind of the beginning stages of bourbon in the United States and kind of how it came. Their distilling practices overseas in Europe for wine and like gin and stuff like that, but then coming over to the United States and trying to find a signature spirit to consume over here. Do you know much about kind of like the origin of that?
I do. It's hard because we know with any industry, we love to have that one inventor that has the light bulb moments, whether it's the telephone, with Alexander Graham Bell, or the assembly line with Ford. And it didn't really happen that way. And it's for the very reason you said. A lot of these immigrants came from Scotland and Ireland with the copper pot stills on their back that they used to distill any grain they could find. It was more rye grain when they're in Pennsylvania and Maryland. And when they came to Kentucky, it was corn. And the innovations we had that made bourbon it is today, or made bourbon the way it was starting around 1850, 1860, was through guys getting together, farmers, and talking about their distilling practices. Well, I found if you char the inside of a barrel, it really ages it differently. Well, I found if you let it sit just a little bit longer, it makes a quality whiskey. Well, I found that if you add a little rye to top off your corn. So there was a lot of people who achieved the same thing at kind of various times, kind of connected. So we don't really have the one innovator. As we get into the modern era over the last 100 years, you can identify more of those things. But how bourbon became bourbon and the recognizable beverages today, it was really the collaboration, a culmination of a lot of small distillers, a lot of farmers, and eventually a lot of small corporate distillers until it kind of became regulated into the criteria we have today that's bourbon. It's a shame that there's not one guy, Johnny Bourbon, Captain Kentucky, that we can point to and say, thank goodness for you. But it was, all this traces is back. There's sometimes I have people I talk to who are Scotch or Irish, and they get upset and they say, we've been doing it that way in Scotland for 300 years. And we're like, no one said you weren't. No one claimed that some guy woke up this morning and decided to distill cereal grains and age it in a barrel. It's just kind of the next evolution and growth that really fit American and particularly Kentucky and Indiana and Tennessee climates, weather pattern, terroir, the soil, all those things. So bourbon, and the best way to say it, I think, was the next evolution of Western European whiskey.
Now, like, I would find that there's definitely this line of demarcation with like, it's from Kentucky or it's not from Kentucky.
Right.
And there's a camp that's like, if it's not made in Kentucky, I don't give a shit if it's made the same way in another state. If it's not made in Kentucky, it's not bourbon.
This is the hot topic, right?
Yeah.
So, when I talked about how I do a presentation called Shattering Myths and Commonly Held Beliefs, you wouldn't be surprised, even here in the Bluegrass State, how many people believe that it has to be made in Kentucky in order to be called bourbon. And it just ain't true. Now, there are people hard at work, including the Kentucky Distillers Association and other trade groups and distillers and tour companies represent cities that will bend it to make you think if it doesn't have to be made here, if it's not made here, it's no good. We had a former governor who used to say 95% of the world's bourbon is made in Kentucky and the other 5% is terrible. And that's, I couldn't disagree with that more. I think that if you know what you're doing and you put the effort into it, there are a number of places around the country that you can make fine and wonderful bourbon, and it doesn't have to be Kentucky. I think that you've got good and bad bourbons coming out of all 49 different states, or many of the states outside of Kentucky, just like you have good and bad bourbon coming out of Kentucky. You can come down here, James, you can go to a liquor store and spend $7 and I can give you a pour of really bad Kentucky bourbon. So it's like anything else. I certainly do not agree that it's not bourbon if it's not from Kentucky, or it's second tier, or it's not as good, or you don't know what you're doing. I will say there's challenges. There is the St. Augustine distillery in Florida, and I believe they're the distillery in Florida where they talked about, in order to get the temperature variations that we have here in Kentucky in this part of the country, for the barrels, so that the liquid moves in and out of those staves, bringing with it the color and the flavor as the whiskey moves in and out of the wood. They take their barrels out at night. They wheel them out of the warehouse so they can get the cool air, and then they put them back in the warehouse during the day so they can get the heat of the warehouse. Well, that's great, but that doesn't really scale well when you have 1,000, 50,000, 1,000,000 barrels. So there's challenges of making whiskey in different states, but with innovation and people who have some know-how, you can make good bourbon just about everywhere in America. Now, I do say America because while it doesn't, as you probably well know, while it doesn't have to be made in Kentucky, it does have to be made in America in order to be called bourbon. That's one of the criteria. From Guam to Vermont, as long as it's made in America, you can still call it bourbon.
Before we get into the real meat of the podcast and talk about Iron Fish and what you're going to be doing with them,
we were getting into it now. I was having a blast over here.
Yeah, one
quick story, James. I had an Uber driver pick me up from the airport 3 weeks ago, and we were talking about what I did and stuff like that. And he was kind of an old timer, and he's back, and he goes, "Yep, it's kind of a shame they changed that law that says bourbon can be made anywhere, but not just Kentucky now." And there was never a law. There was never anything that said it had to be made in Kentucky. But he was driving me. I was 15 minutes from home. Is late. I really didn't want to get in a fight with the Uber driver because these people hold these beliefs pretty. So I just said, "Yep, sure is a shame." And just I don't have time to argue with everyone.
It's everywhere, and like I said, everybody has a take. Everybody,
Sure is a shame. He said that they changed them rules so they can make bourbon outside of Kentucky now. Sure. Just never.
I mean, I love when people get excited about something new, but I often found that whenever somebody would go to a distillery for the first time, they would come back to home here to Manistee, and the greatest thing on earth is what they just had, and nothing compares to it. Or if they've only ever had Blanton's, for example, that's the only bourbon that they want. They would come into a liquor store, and I had 1,000 different SKUs of just whiskey and bourbon. And the amount of people that would walk in and number one would ask for Blanton's. And if I said no, they'd just leave, or Weller or anything like that. They would just leave and not take the time to really look at what's on the shelf. I mean, if you could just take a comparison really quick, everybody's got their own take on bourbon, Weller, go down the list. But let's take Blanton's, for example. If you were to take one bottle off the shelf that you think is a great value, that's going to give you the same, it's going to be right on par with the flavors of Blanton. What would it be?
Yeah. It varies. You can ask me this, and I'd probably change my answer every month or so. But right now, I'm going to say this bottle because it's ubiquitous. It's all 50 states. It's affordable. I think it's a tremendous value. And while the flavor profile isn't identical to Blanton's, I think it's got that same robust, high quality. And that's Russell's Reserve. Russell's Reserve 10-year out of
good.
Right? Out of Wild Turkey. I think that's one that we see probably about $40, $45 in your neck of the woods. It's readily available. It's got a 10-year age statement, and it is tremendous. And I think word's getting out on that one. But right now, I know in your job, you probably say, we don't have that, but would you like to try this? And that's one I'm often telling people, say, you should give this one a try. It's worth your $40. And I have a feeling that you might really enjoy it. So today in this scenario, that's one that's on the top of my list, because all the time we're in a bourbon boom period where there's so much great bourbon on the market. And just because your beloved bottle that you've heard people talk about is unavailable, oh my gosh, there's so many great options that are available that you could just grab and continue to be available. These are from major distilleries who have warehouses full of stuff. I'm not saying it won't change. I'm not saying the price won't go up. I'm not saying it won't be available one day. But for now, plenty of them. Another great that's a staple that's I wouldn't say is on the same par, but for $37 it's hard to beat, is that Four Roses small batch. It's a quality pour. The price is there. It's consistent, and it's always available. So I get frustrated too by the people who only want to bitch and moan about how they can't find their allocated bourbons from one distillery. And the distilleries are tired of hearing that too. They're like, we're trying.
I'm sure they are.
We're putting it out there.
So do you know much about the allocation process in terms of what what goes to states and what doesn't. Because
Mystery.
even I've all the years that I've been in the business, I've never was able to get like a straight answer from a supplier. And for the most part,
Yeah.
that's because I'm talking to salespeople who probably don't know. They just say, well, this state's only getting 10,000 cases and that's it. Or
Right. So my understanding is that every distiller has an allocation room where there's like a wizard. He's like the robe and he's got a thing and he waves his wand and then a spell casts. No, I think the cloak is largely due to the famous 3-tier system, which we have as a result of prohibition, and having that link between distillery, distributor, and retail spot, whether it's bar, liquor store, what have you, has created curtains of not a lot of knowledge. You're not supposed to know beyond one tier beyond that. So they keep that information pretty guarded to the chest. Combine that with the fact that some major distilleries work with different distributors for the different states. So one distributor can only speak to what they're getting for the state and not to what another state's getting. So no, and I think that's partially done on purpose. And I think there's some benefits and drawbacks. But when it comes to who gets what when, again, the only exception is Pappy Van Winkle. I believe since they do one bottling once a year, they put the information out there about when the bottles are sent to their distributor in their state, so that as a consumer, you can anticipate when those bottles will be available that one time a year. And then other things like Old Forester Birthday Bourbon is the national release date or around then that goes in those states. But no, that is a ongoing mystery of which states, which markets get which. And then it gets more conflated. For example, I believe the state of Massachusetts has 5 different distribution districts. So you can't get it just the one state. You've got to, work with all the 5 different distribution partners or different distribution managers in those. And of course you have control states, as you know, and states run by stores run by the state as opposed to privately owned. So it's opaque and unclear to me as much as it is to you.
do you find that you can get more access to some of these hard to get allocated bottles on premise at restaurants and bars that serve at a higher volume? Because it seems to me sometimes when okay, all right.
And I have to do my best not to take it for granted,
Sure.
because all the time you have these bars and restaurants, especially in Louisville, who have strong relationships with the distributor, who maybe go back a while, maybe they've owned other restaurants, and the bourbon bottles aren't their number one business. It has since closed, which is good because I don't like giving out my secret spots anyway, but there was a tremendous brunch spot here in Louisville called the North End Cafe. And they got all these great bottles all the time. And all they did for the price was take their price they paid, added a few, and then divided by the pours in the bottle. So they had amazing bourbon bottles. People wouldn't ever think to go to a brunch spot to have them.
Right.
Out-of-towners largely avoided them. And when they were gone because they charged a very fair price based on their price that they paid to the distributor. And you'll see those. It's not uncommon. I think what's more common is you'll go into like a nicer high-end restaurant and they got their eye on the customer and they know what they're doing. And the bottles that are more sought after, not necessarily better, they'll charge a premium for those. But other ones that are great that there's not a lot of, that they don't go through a lot, wonderful availability, 1 ounce, 2 ounce pours for a perfectly reasonable price. So yes, so many more options with on-premise spots that have a well-stocked bourbon bar and a deep menu. There's always some gems to be found, I think.
What's your opinion on bottles like with staves in it or aged at sea like Oceans? Sometimes I think those things.
It's a big can of worms you're opening over there, James.
Yeah, well, I mean, I'm super interested because for me, Oceans makes some really good bourbons, but I just wonder if maybe the take of it just being out in the ocean, sloshing around on a boat, increases the price just for the novelty of it.
Well, as I said when I started, the nice thing about not being associated with a brand is I can say, again, I'm not out to bash anyone. That's I'm not here to throw anyone on the bus, but I can speak pretty freely without worrying about too much repercussions. The bottles that have the pieces of oak in there, I don't think very highly of. I think that's a gimmick to the top degree. I have trouble wrapping my head around how that's making any difference in a glass bottle by putting a piece of charred wood in there. I won't say the brand name, and who knows, maybe I need to revisit and have a pour, but I can't think of, isn't having things not in your bottle that aren't the liquid usually viewed as a bad thing? Isn't that?
Yeah,
Isn't that bad?
I would assume.
Anyway, as far as Jeffersons go, that's a more complicated thing. The most important thing I can say about that, because I get this question all the time, it is not a gimmick. They certainly send those barrels out on giant ocean liners that cross the equator and go thousands of miles out at sea. They are out there by the hundreds, so it's not They are 100% doing it. Some people think that it's just a big story and an illusion. The pushback on that from the bourbon community, much less the industry, would be awful if it was a
Sure.
fake. The bigger question is, does it make a difference? And I must have asked 1,000 people, and I swear, James, it's right down the middle, 50-50. People say they can see and appreciate some of the time it's been on the ocean. They think it ages a little better, the sea brine. Others people say it doesn't taste any different than similar products I've had on the market. From what I can tell, if you did a blind tasting, just feels more expensive. It has to be more expensive because, like a double barreling, there's a cost to putting it out on the ocean. I think my biggest answer on this is that I would love it if I could tour the distillery, because as you know, as it goes out to sea, it's a finished bourbon. It's done all the things, met all the criteria, aged in warehouses at the right proof, at the right criteria, ready to go. And then this is almost like a secondary finishing, like the equivalent of Angel's Envy putting in a port wine barrels. So what I would love is to visit the Jefferson Visitor Center and have them give me a pour of the Jefferson's Oceans before it goes out at sea and a pour after it goes out at sea, so I can compare and contrast. And the fact that they do not offer that experience almost speaks volumes in and of itself. Another thing is that whiskey is very much, as the alcohol industry is in general, a monkey see, monkey do business. When
Sure.
one brand finds something that works, the others jump as quick as they can to get on it. And I think if empirically and undoubtedly aging your bourbon at sea created a better bourbon, you would see a fleet of Jim Beam ships painted with that Jim Beam red logo just going back and forth to England all the time, carrying bourbon on there. So I think the short answer is the jury's out. People have different opinions. There's not a wrong answer or right answer, since they certainly do age them at sea. They even have, last time I visited, I was told the container ships now have specific ricking, so they kind of are hanging suspended. So they kind of even go back and forth and slosh a little more in the barrels. Whether it makes a difference, that's kind of up to you to decide. Told you, that's strong opinions. I think it's a great bourbon. I like the Jeffersons.
Yeah.
I'm just not. I just don't know if it makes a difference being out at sea. I can probably be convinced, but I maybe I'll taste them again this afternoon. Do my own private tasting again.
So for Ironfish,
Yes.
before we start talking about their juice, how did you meet Richard and develop this relationship and then lead up towards you going out to Ironfish this weekend?
I'm so excited for this. So Richard and I met this past fall at that event I mentioned, the Bourbon Country Burn. He is an avid bike rider and, as you know, whiskey lover. And he was down there to do the bike riding. And my role currently at the Burn is I'm the distillery experience manager. So I set up some on-site base camp events for after they're done riding in the evening at the Bourbon Base Camp, which is one big whiskey festival party. There's tasting tents, there's food, there's a bar truck, there's live music. And what I do is I help set up the VIP experiences with some master distillers come in. I arrange some fireside chats with people who are industry experts who have stories to tell. And I host a presentation or two of my own. And he sat in on one I did called 4 Bourbons You May Not Know About But Should Be Drinking, or something with a less convoluted term. And he enjoyed it. We had a chance to talk. He thought it was super interesting. I was incredibly flattered. And we started the wheels going on, him inviting me to the distillery to do something similar, sharing some of my bourbon knowledge and thoughts behind brands, while also showcasing Ironfish, along with some other brands. And the brands that we'll showcase at this tasting on Saturday night aren't meant to be better or worse than Ironfish, a comparison of how Ironfish is doing it, and then what these Kentucky or other bourbons or malt whiskeys are doing, and kind of tasting them side by side. Always the best way.
Oh, okay, so you're doing a side-by-side at Ironfish?
A little bit with the tasting. Okay. The event's called a Journey Through American Craft Whiskey. So we're going to sample and talk about what Ironfish has done with 3 of their expressions, and then we're going to talk about how some other people are doing it, and see kind of what's going on, and all focus on American craft brands.
Have you had you've had an opportunity to taste their whiskeys?
Oh yes, oh yes.
So, what's your take? I'm super interested in this.
I don't want to spoil too much, but I have my integrity, and I'd be a fool if I said, boy, this will is repugnant, but I'm sure going to come up. I think it's tremendous. I think Ironfish has a great story, and I think the whiskey is worth tasting, and I think it's getting better every day as they continue to age. And it's amazing. They've been open since 2016, yeah. And to have products that are from their distillery without on their own backs is impressive. I've enjoyed what I've had so far, and I look forward to digging in and getting up there more. Yeah.
Have you been there yet?
No, this will be my first chance. So I'm learning everything I can, but I can't wait to see it.
It's so awesome. From when they started to what it is now, it's I mean, I know you've been to a ton of distilleries. I haven't been to too many, but Ironfish is besides being a homer, I mean,
Right.
I love them. I love it, the unique one of the I know that they're still kind of young in terms of how long that they've been around, since 2016. But I mean, the accessibility to Richard, his wife Sarah, the other partners, they're there working. Like, you go
Right.
out to Iron Fish and Sarah is bringing out food. She's in the kitchen doing dishes. She's taking people on tours. She's out in the market. I mean, Richard's constantly in the market. These guys are, I mean, they're getting after it, and it's really amazing.
One thing we met, and then I'll showcase into how they're avoiding two pitfalls that I've seen a lot of other distilleries make. When one thing he told me that really stood out is, he said, we want to focus on building a distillery that's going to be here for future generations. We want to start putting something together that might be here. I think he said something like 200 years, and we're learning what it takes to do that. And having that mindset has avoided them leaning exclusively on sourced whiskey. There are business plans set up today where they have no plans to ever start their own distillery, but largely get it from places like MGP in Indiana and others. A lot of places start out that way. It's a whole different ball of wax when that's your long-term business plan. And so
Yeah.
they've sidestepped that. And then, second of all, I don't want to name names, but I've talked to owners of distilleries who can't even seem to tell you the mash bill or anything about it. It's like they woke up one morning and they said, owning a distillery sounds like a fun way to spend my time and money.
Sure.
It's clear from a 5-minute conversation with Richard, he's incredibly invested, passionate, and he cannot wait to tell you about Iron Fish. Those two things combined, making it so that the product will eventually be 100% sourced from your distillery. Now, they're doing above and beyond because they're doing a lot with the grains on the site as well, which not everyone has the ability to do. But having it come out of your distillery is going to always make for a better product. When you source it, you have such limitations. When your long-term plan is only to rely on others to provide the whiskey. And then just having that owner, no one's going to be more passionate about your bourbon than you if you're the owner, if it's coming from your spot. So I think those things are setting them up for tremendous success for years to come. I can't wait to get up there. It's going to be a blast.
Yeah, you're gonna love it. You spending the weekend or just coming up hot for a day?
No, I fly in Thursday evening. I'm driving up from Grand Rapids, and then we've got different events and activities. I'll get to know the distillery and the team on Friday and Saturday, and then our big event Saturday night. Hoping to pack that barn and get in there. We're going to tell some good bourbon stories and dig into Iron Fish and walk through the tasting. We've got 3 very different products we'll be featuring. So it's great.
For people that are listening or
that,
watching this, what are the products that you're going to be tasting, and what are some of the topics you're going to tackle?
Yeah. So I believe we're going to be doing the Mad Angler Bourbon, which is a 5-year whiskey, a straight bourbon that's out there. Which is great, a good chance to compare a baseline bourbon and talk about the different composition and how it's come to be, and go over the rules of bourbon and kind of the history it's come to. And then one of the largest trends, and I'll touch more on this, about 5 years ago, one of the big buzzwords in bourbon or American whiskey was bottled in bond, having that stamp of quality. What old was new again. It came back from 1897, and now it's kind of finished bourbons. Bourbons finished in different barrels, but I think the future is American single malts, kind of focusing on what the Scotch has done, but don't call it Scotch whiskey.
Right.
And this is tricky because you got to have a leg up. This is a grain you got to lay down a while ago. Barrels don't pop up overnight, and they've had something they've been working on for a while, and they've got a 6-year, 11-month single malt that is kind of a new release that they're working on. And I can't wait to share the story about how I think this is going to be the next big trend in American whiskeys, is 100% malted barley single malt whiskeys. And then we're going to do a forecast bourbon, a blend of bourbons finished in a variety of barrels, rum, cognac, and such like that. So it'll be great.
That's my favorite bourbon they have out there. The forecast.
Oh yeah?
Yeah,
good,
I like
good,
it a lot.
Good,
it's
good,
really
good.
good.
Yeah. Some of the stuff may be changing, but that's the general idea. And yeah, it'll be at the barn. We got 100 tickets total available. It's $40. And it should be an absolute blast.
Yeah, I'm hoping to get up there. It's a busy weekend, but I'm hoping to get up there for it. Shake your hand.
How's the weather? How's this time of May look this time of year?
I mean, I already got a tan. It's beautiful up here. Right now we're touching 70. We're going to be 70 all weekend. So
good.
Have a good time up there for sure.
I didn't want to come up, when you still got snow on the ground.
We had a light winter, so we're good.
Okay. All right, good.
Can you go back? I wrote this down here. The whiskey burn. Can you talk about that one more time? Because I'm a rider. I own a racing company, and one of the things.
No kidding. Look at this.
Yeah, we do an endurance gravel bike race that actually it's 100 miles and it goes throughout Manistee County, and it actually
Yes. What's it called?
the Rusty Fish.
Yeah, we looked at they have an expo. When I was with them full time, we looked at coming up and being part of that expo one time.
Nice. Yeah, we do a race. It starts in Manistee, goes to Ironfish, and comes back.
Oh,
Yeah.
This has been going on a few years, right?
This is going to be our 4th year.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
this is a great event. So Austin and Molly are the co-founders, and they're old friends who love biking, and they were on a trip biking. I think they were in Argentina, and they said, we need to bring something like this to Kentucky. Those rolling hills, those knobs, that bluegrass is beautiful, and we could tie it into bourbon. So they really launched a unique kind of bike event, and they called it the Bourbon Country Burn. So it's 3 days. Everything is an out and back loop from the beautiful Kentucky Horse Park Campground. Just about every route visits a distillery, but there's a short, medium, long, and century route. And the motto is ride bikes, drink bourbon, because once you're done in the evening, we have the Bourbon Base Camp, and that's where the party begins. There's no alcohol allowed in the course. I often joke the motto should have been ride bikes, and when you're done with doing that, get off your bike and drink the bourbon, because we want to be clear that it's 2 separate things.
Yeah.
We have about 1,000 riders every year. We have so many people come back year after year after year. And it's very communal. People tell us there's nothing like it in all the different rides they've done. Always clear, it's a ride, not a race. So you go at your own pace. We've got great support stops along the way. Course marshals, rather. And it's a really well put together, well organized race. My role is largely to do with the bourbon. I wouldn't know what to do with a bike if you put one in front of me. But we have a blast at Bourbon Base Camp. We have some of the best distilleries from all around the state come. So every night we feature about 6 different distilleries, and your ticket includes samples from the sampling tents where the brand ambassadors tell you what's going on. That's Friday and Saturday night. And then there's things like a Torchlight Trivia that I host, a Thursday welcome sample, just all the things. It's an absolute blast. BourbonCountryBurn.com is the website. The event is the last weekend in September 27th through the 29th, I believe, at the Kentucky Horse Park in Lexington. I'm thrilled that I still get to be involved with them. It's like 3 months a year I put on my Bourbon Country Burn hat and work to build these experiences and meet wonderful people like Richard. So
yeah.
it all comes together.
We do a signature cocktail at our event that Ironfish puts together for us, and when Richard actually brought it down to because our event is the first weekend in October.
Okay.
And he came down and he said, he told me all about the event. He was like, we just got back from Kentucky. We did this bike ride down there, and drank a bunch of bourbon, kind of gave me the recap. But now we're finally connecting the dots here.
There you go. Now you know.
That's really, really cool. So anyhow, bud, I think we can put a bookend on this. This was a great podcast. I learned a lot. I'm going to
thank you so much for taking time and having me. This was a blast chatting with you. It's always good to talk to someone who has like their thumb halfway in the industry. It's always hard when someone goes, so tell me, what is bourbon?
What is
okay? Let's start from the start.
What's the difference between bourbon and whiskey?
Right, all the time.
I'll put all your links in this. I'm gonna do my best to get this edited done today.
My favorite bourbon is Jack Daniel's. Well, yeah. That's a Tennessee whiskey, but it's close.
Oh, good shit. All right, brother. I'm gonna get this out into the interwebs and let everybody see it. And
James, this is great. Thanks so much. I had a blast talking whiskey with you. This was a fun way to spend some time this morning. So thank you.
Awesome. I look forward to seeing you this weekend.
Yeah, and let me know if you need anything else from me or if there's anything I can do.
I will. Cheers, mate. Thank you.
James, absolute pleasure. Have a good one.